"You can't park here, old man. This spot's for people who actually need it. Can't you read the sign?" The officer's voice, sharp as shattered glass, sliced through the crisp autumn air. Sam Cartwright's, 78 years young, his back a road. Map of old Payne's flinched. His worn, faded blue van, his lifeline to the world, was already being prepped by the tow truck driver, its front wheels hovering ominously. Sam clutched the worn edges of his disabled veteran placard, the plastic cool against his trembling palm. He was vulnerable, exposed on a busy city street. His quiet dignity chipped away with every passing second. If you believe true heroes walk among us, often unseen, and deserve unwavering respect, type honor in the comments below. Samuel Cartwright was a man of quiet routines and even quieter sorrows. Mornings began before dawn, a habit ingrained from decades past, from a life he rarely spoke of. He'd make his coffee weak and sit by the window of his small, meticulously tidy apartment. Watching the city wake, his apartment was filled with the scent of old books and lemon. Policia's stark contrast to the metallic temps of cordite and the damp earth of foxholes that sometimes still clung to the edges of his dreams. His Vanna, slightly battered but mechanically sound machine, was more than just transport. It was independence. It was the chariot that took him to his VA appointments, to the quiet park where he'd feed pigeons, to the grocery store where he'd buy just enough for one. The disabled veteran placard hanging from his rearview mirror wasn't a convenience. It was a necessity earned in the jungles of Vietnam, where parts of his youth and his mobility had been irrevocably lost. He carried his honorable discharge papers and VA identification everywhere, tucked into an old leather wallet, their creases as familiar as the lines on his own hands. Today, he'd driven downtown for a specialist appointment, a rare and anxious undertaking. Parking, as always, was a nightmare. But he'd found it a clearly marked handicap spot, a small island of relief in a sea of urban chaos. He'd carefully displayed his placard, checked it twice, and hobbled out, his cane thudding softly on the pavement. Now, less than an hour later, that small relief had curdled into a public humiliation. Officer Tidwell Badge, number 307, adjusted his utility belt, the leather creaking with a sound of vicious self-importance. He was young, barely 30, with a haircut as sharp as his gaze, and an air of someone who believed rules were less guidelines and more sacred. Commandments, especially when he was the one enforcing them, he repeated, his tone dripping with condescension. A small crowd of onlookers had begun to gather, their faces a mixture of curiosity and mild, detached pity. Sam felt a flush creep up his neck. "Officer," Sam began, his voice raspy, betraying an unsteadiness he despised. "This is my placard. It's valid. My VA identification." He fumbled for his wallet, his fingers stiff and uncooperative. Visual close-up. On Sam's trembling, AJ-spotted hands struggling with the worn leather of his wallet, Tidwell let out an exaggerated sigh. "Look, Grandpa, people borrow placards, fake them, you name it. This is a prime spot. Tow truck's already here. It's coming with us." The tow truck driver, a burly man with an impassive expression, gave a final check to the chains. "Just doing my job, Pops," he grunted, not meeting Sam's eyes. "But I have the paperwork right here," Sam pleaded, finally extracting his VA card. The photo was 20 years old, a younger man with haunted eyes staring back. "Please, just look." Tidwell waved a dismissive hand. "Too late for that. You should have thought about that before you parked illegally." He gestured toward the sign. "It says handicapped parking permit required. You assume because you're old, you get a pass." The injustice of it stung more than the cold. It wasn't just about the van, the fine, the inconvenience. It was the casual stripping of his dignity, the implication he was a cheat, a liar. He who had given so much, the worry of the tow trucks. Winch was a sickening sound-a-mechanical lament for his dwindling independence. Each click of the mechanism tightening the chains felt like a nail hammered into his composure. Visual, the front wheels of the van lifting slowly, emphasizing Sam's helplessness. "Officer, please," Sam tried again, his voice cracking now. "This van, it's specially fitted." "My chair, my appointments," he gestured vaguely, the words catching in his throat. He saw a flicker of something in the eyes of a woman in the small crowd, perhaps sympathy, but she quickly looked away, No one intervened. They were just Waukea Minor Street drama unfolding. A brief distraction in their busy days, Officer Tidwell turned to his patrol car, pulling out his ticket book. "You can take it up with the impound lot, and next time, find a regular spot." He scribbled quickly, his pen scratching aggressively on the pad. The finality in his tone was like a door slamming shut. Sam watched, a profound weariness settling over him. He'd faced down enemy fire, endured monsoons and leech-infested jungles, seen things that still clawed at his sleep. Yet this petty bureaucratic cruelty felt uniquely debilitating. He was invisible, his history, his sacrifices erased by the judgment of a young man in a uniform who saw only a frail, inconvenient old man. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a cold, quiet anger and an even colder resignation. He knew then that arguing further was pointless. This officer wasn't interested in truth, only in asserting his authority. The tow truck driver gave a thumbs up to Tidwell, ready to pull away. Sam felt a tremor pass through him, not of fear, but of a resolve he hadn't felt in years. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't grovel. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades, Sam slowly reached into his inner jacket pocket. Officer Tidwell, busy writing the citation, barely glanced up. The small crowd began to disperse, the show seemingly over. Sam pulled out an old, battered flip phone, a relic from a less complicated time. His fingers, surprisingly steady now, navigated the small buttons. He scrolled through the sparse contact list, past pharmacy, past VA clinic, until he found the one entry he hadn't dialed in over 5 years. Colonel J. Matthews, eMERG. He pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Visual close-up on Sam's face, etched with a quiet determination as he makes the call. Sam's voice was low, devoid of its earlier tremor. "It's Sam, Samuel Cartwright. Yes, it's been too long. I'm in a bit of a bind, downtown city center, corner of Elm and Oak. My van." There was a pause. Sam listened, his expression unreadable. Yes, I understand. Thank you, James." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He then turned and walked slowly, deliberately, to a cold stone bench nearby, his cane tapping a somber rhythm on the pavement. He sat, his back straight, despite the ache, and simply watched. Watched as the tow truck began to slowly pull his van into the flow of traffic. Watched as Officer Tidwell finished writing the ticket, tore it from his book, and strode over to tuck it under the windshield wiper of where the van had been. A final absurd insult. Tidwell, noticing Sam seated calmly, smirked, giving up. So easy? Wise choice. He sauntered back to his patrol car, perhaps, to run Sam's plates for any other outstanding violations. A final twist of the knife. Sam didn't respond. He just waited, his gaze fixed on the spot his van had occupied. The autumn wind ruffling his thin gray hair, an unnatural stillness seemed to settle around him, a prelude. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The city's cacophony, distant sirens, car horns, the general urban hums seemed to amplify in the silence left by the departed tow truck. Officer Tidwell was now leaning against his cruiser, idly scrolling through his phone, a picture of bored authority. Sam remained on the benchy, a solitary, stoic figure. Then a new sound began to cut through the urban symphony. Faint at first, a low rhythmic growl, it grew steadily louder, more insistent. It wasn't the typical siren of a police car or an ambulance. This was deeper, more resonant, carrying an undeniable undercurrent of power. Visual. Officer Tidwell looks up from his phone, a slight frown creasing his brow, trying to place the sound. The sound split, multiplied. Heads began to turn. Even the few remaining bystanders paused, their curiosity piqued once more. Then they came into view. 3 immaculate dark green military SUVs, official U.S. Marine Corps insignia emblazoned on their doors, turned the corner onto Elm Street with disciplined precision. They didn't use sirens, but their sheer presence, the way they moved as a coordinated unit, commanded attention. They fanned out, one pulling to the curb directly in front of Tidwell's cruiser, effectively blocking it. The other 2 flanked the area, their movements swift and purposeful. The street, moments before a scene of minor civil infraction, suddenly felt like a secured zone. Doors opened in unison, and 6 Marines ramrods straight in their dress blues. a stark, imposing contrast to the casual civilian attire around them. Disembarked. Their spit-shine shoes hit the pavement with a sound that echoed Tidwell's earlier creaking leather butt, imbued with an entirely different kind of authority. They didn't look around. Their focus was immediate and unwavering. From the lead vehicle, the passenger door opened. Out stepped a man who radiated command. He was tall, his uniform impeccable, the eagles on his shoulders gleaming. A full colonel. His face was weathered but stern, his eyes sharp and intelligent. This was Colonel James Jim Matthews. He surveyed the scene in a single sweeping glance. Tidwell by his car. The empty handicap spot, then his gaze softened almost imperceptibly as it landed on Samuel Cartwright, still seated on the bench. Visual Colonel Matthews' eyes lock onto Sama. Subtle shift in his expression from stern authority to deep concern and respect. Without a word to Officer Tidwell, without even a glance in his direction, Colonel Matthews strode directly toward Sam. The 6 Marines formed a loose, respectful perimeter, their presence undeniable yet unobtrusive. As Matthews approached, Sam made a slow, pained effort to rise. "Stay seated, Sam," Matthews said, his voice surprisingly gentle, yet carrying the unmistakable timbre of command. He reached Sam, and to the utter astonishment of Officer Tidwell and the now wide-eyed onlookers, Matthews came to a halt and executed a crisp, formal salute. "Mr. Cartwright," he said, his voice thick with respect. "It's an honor, sir." Sam inclined his head, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. "James, you came. You called," Matthews replied simply, his eyes conveying a depth of understanding and shared history that silenced the street. He then turned, his demeanor shifting. Instantly back to ice cold, authority, and fixed his gaze on Officer Tidwell, who was now standing frozen by his cruiser. His earlier smugness replaced by a rapidly dawning apprehension. The color was visibly draining from Tidwell's face. Officer Colonel Matthews began, his voice devoid of warmth, each word landing like a precision strike. "Colonel James Matthews, United States Marine Corps. Would you care to explain to me why a decorated combat veteran, a Purple Heart recipient, being harassed, is legally permitted? Specially equipped vehicle unlawfully towed from a designated disabled parking space under your authority." Officer Tidwell swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. His eyes darted from the imposing colonel to the unassuming old man on the bench, a horrifying equation beginning to form in his mind. Visual close-up on Tidwell's face, showing his shock and dawning realization. Beads of sweat appear on his forehead. "Colonel Sir," Tidwell stammered, his voice suddenly several octaves higher. I was unaware. The vehicle was in a handicap spot. I checked the placard. It looked suspicious. We have a lot of fraud." Matthews cut him off with a slice of his hand. "Suspicious, officer? Did you verify his credentials? Did you ask for his Department of Veterans Affairs identification? Did you, at any point, afford this man the basic courtesy of a thorough check before humiliating him and impounding property vital to his well-being?" Matthews' voice grew louder, resonating with controlled fury. "This man, Officer Tidwell, is Sergeant Major Samuel Cartwright, retired. He served 25 years in the United States Marine Corps. He fought at Kisan. He was wounded 3 times defending men like you, so you could have the freedom to stand here and abuse your authority." The words Kisan hung in the era named synonymous with unimaginable bravery and brutal sacrifice. A few onlookers gasped. One older man in the crowd removed his hata, spontaneous gesture of respect, the full weight of Colonel Matthews. Words descended upon Officer Tidwell like a physical blow. "Sergeant Major Cartwright," Matthews continued, his voice now a low, dangerous rumble, "is not just a Purple Heart recipient. He is also the recipient of the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during the Tet Offensive. He single-handedly held off an enemy platoon attacking his company's command post after his officers were incapacitated, saving countless lives. His actions that day are legend within the Cordis studied at Quantico." He took a step closer to Tidwell, whose face was now ashen. "The placard you deemed suspicious was issued because of shrapnel that remains lodged near his spina. Constant reminder of his service, the van you so casually had towed contains a custom lift for his mobility chair, without which he is severely restricted." Visual implied flashback. Quick, respectful montage of stylized images of younger Sam in combat, a medal ceremony. The VA hospital. Matthews took a step closer to Tidwell, whose face was now ashen. "This man doesn't look like a hero to you, officer." "Heroes don't always wear their valor on their sleeves. Sometimes they wear it in the stoop of their shoulders, in the quiet pain in their eyes, in the dignity they maintain even when subjected to profound disrespect by those who should know better." The tow truck driver, who had pulled over a block down upon seeing the military vehicles, now sheepishly walked back, his earlier indifference replaced by visible shock and shame. He looked from the colonel to Sam, then down at his shoes. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken apologies and the crushing weight of Tidwell's misjudgment. Even the city noise seemed to have receded, paying homage to the gravity of the moment. Sam watched not with triumph, but with a quiet sorrow. This wasn't about victory. It was about a respect that should have been inherent. One of the young Marines, on a quiet order from Colonel Matthews, made a call. Within minutes, the tow truck that had taken Sam's van returned, its driver looking considerably more contrite than before. Under the watchful eyes of the Marines, the van was carefully unhooked and lowered back to the pavement, its tires kissing the asphalt with a gentle thud. Colonel Matthews personally escorted Sam to his vehicle, opening the door for him. "We'll see to it that your van is checked for any damage," Sergeant Major Matthews said, his voice again gentle when addressing Sam. "And this incident will be addressed at the highest levels of city administration, I assure you." Officer Tidwell stood frozen, a statue of mortification. His supervisor, police captain summoned by one of Matthews' aides, had arrived and was now engaged in a very quiet, very stern conversation with the colonel a short distance away. The captain's face was grim. Tidwell knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his career had just taken a severe, perhaps irreparable detour. He risked a glance at Sergeant Major Cartwright, who was now slowly, carefully situating himself in the driver's seat of his van. There was no malice in the old soldier's eyes, only a profound wariness and a quiet dignity that Tidwell now found utterly terrifying in its power. The ticket he had so officiously written lay forgotten on the dashboard of his cruiser, a pathetic monument to his arrogance. The crowd of onlookers had grown, but they were silent now, their expressions a mixture of awe, respect, and a collective sense of shame for their earlier indifference. They had witnessed not just an injustice, corrected, but a revelation of hidden greatness, as the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows down Elm Street. Sergeant Major Samuel Cartwright started the engine of his van. It coughed once, then settled into its familiar, comforting rumble. Colonel Matthews stepped back and rendered another sharp salute. The 6 Marines, standing at attention by their vehicles, followed suit. Visual Sam, framed in his van window, gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Colonel Matthews. The Marines hold their salutes for a moment, the bustling city street transformed into a parade ground, a silent testament to a lifetime of service. Sam pulled carefully away from the curb, his van merging smoothly into the traffic. He didn't look back. There was no need. His dignity, momentarily lost, had been restored tenfold. Officer Tidwell was escorted to his captain's car, his future uncertain, but his education in humility painfully complete. The city, it was later reported, issued a formal apology to Sergeant Major Cartwright. Officer Tidwell was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, and mandatory veteran sensitivity training was implemented for the entire precinct. But for Sam, the true resolution was simpler. He could go to his appointments, feed his pigeons, and live his quiet life, his independence intact. The story of the old veteran and the overzealous officer became a quiet legend in the neighborhood, a reminder that heroes are not defined by their outward appearance, but by the content of their character and the sacrifices they've made. Sometimes, the quietest souls carry the heaviest medals earned in crucibles we can barely imagine. True respect isn't given. It's owed especially to those who have paid the price for the freedoms we so easily take for granted. Never judge a book by its cover, for within the worn pages might lie a story of unimaginable courage. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more stories that honor the sacrifices and inspire respect. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more powerful narratives. Type honor in the comments below to pay tribute to heroes like Samuel Cartwright.